Hi, I'm Carrie Cassidy from Project Camelot. I'm here to discuss my latest interview with Captain Mark Richards of the Secret Space Program, or Space Command as some people call it. So I am going to be talking about my time interviewing him in Solano Prison, along with his wife, Joanne Richards, and I am, as I say in the preamble here, I am an investigative journalist, documentary filmmaker, and I have been visiting Mark for around 5 years, approximately once every 6 months, and doing an in-depth interview with him about the Secret Space Program. And because he is in prison, this gives him the ability and leeway to discuss what is in essence way above top secret, and I believe the government allows him to talk simply because they believe he is discredited by the fact that he has been imprisoned for a murder he did not commit. He is said to be the mastermind of a so-called murder of an individual called Richard Baldwin, and that murder was committed by two young boys at the time of the age of 18, and Richard Baldwin has been documented to be a pedophile. So Mark was not involved in the murder, and this particular interview is going to lay down some of the background that I've gotten from Mark this time. This particular interview is concerned with the case and some of the things that Mark wanted to bring forward about the case that are not out there. There's been some interest in the public and in various sectors, and with a specific group that is attempting to discredit both Joanne Richards and Mark Richards, as well as myself, in regard to the Mark Richards case. And so we are making an added effort here to reach the public with the accurate information. I will say that after the 5 years of interviewing him, I can basically say, and I've interviewed over 1,000 people at this point on audio and video, and I have a YouTube channel with, at this time, well over 61 million unique viewers, and I think it's 228,000 subscribers. So I do have quite a large following, and I can also testify to the fact that as an investigative journalist specializing in above top secret information from whistleblowers, that I believe I am an excellent judge of character. And in this case, I can say that without any hesitation that Mark Richards is absolutely who he claims to be. So I will go into the details now of the interview and be following along with the transcript. So I'm going to be going over the transcript that I wrote, and you are welcome to follow along with the written transcript as I go through it. So basically, I've given you my disclaimer. I am going to state the overview. For over 30 years, Captain Mark Richards has been and still is a prisoner of war between the on and off planet races and inner Earth races that have dominated Earth for centuries. He is an honorable officer of the Navy who, because of his rebellion against the Draco and Reptoids and Greys, which is called the Luciferian Alliance, is considered a threat to their operations. He was framed for a murder he is accused of having masterminded while he was on a mission off-planet in service to humanity. He was captain of a Starship Enterprise-type vessel fighting the war against aliens bent on the takeover of planet Earth. I am the only journalist who has interviewed him in prison, in person. And this interview was conducted March 10th, 2019. So I'm going to be going over some key takeaways from this interview, and you can follow along with me here. After waiting in lines to be processed through the prison paperwork for about an hour and a half this time, we finally made it to the prisoner meeting area. There are some key takeaways from this interview. First of all, Mark and his father's arch enemy, according to Mark, was James Jesus Angleton. And this is also the case for Kennedy. According to Mark, Angleton was instrumental in the death of John F. Kennedy and the framing of Captain Mark Richards. The second major takeaway from this interview, is that there are 6 alien-derived AIs currently messing with Earth, and they do not have our best interests in mind. So, as an addendum, I want to say that Mark answers nearly all the questions I ask immediately with no hesitation. The exception comes when there is something he has to figure out how he can reveal information without at the same time violating his national security oath or an ongoing operation. He has been told expressly more or less what he can and can't say, and he is currently reporting to a group that he is saying is undisclosed at this time. Prior to this, a couple of years ago, or at least a year ago, he was still reporting to Bobby Ray Inman. So I'm not sure whether he doesn't report to Bobby Ray Inman anymore, or whether this information has become classified suddenly, and this is the different storyline. Update on prison life and Mark's health. His health has markedly improved. He is in training for a new job. He's head of the optical lab that supplies all eyewear for Medicaid. It is a highly technical job, supervising around 100 men, as well as a number of robots that operate the machinery. He is also being trained on computers. The last time he was around computers on a job in prison was where they were using very old software, he says. He's also teaching a screenwriting class, and his group of inmates have 30 finished screenplays that he believes might become the basis for a TV series not unlike Breaking Bad or Orange is the New Black. Short summary. The murder and the trial. Mark states that he doesn't really know what happened because he wasn't there, and the DA was given most or all of his info from this mysterious character whose name is Andrew Campbell, who was supposedly at the scene of the crime, took part in the murder, but was never charged. Andrew Campbell may be an assumed name. Joanne Richards, Mark's wife, had tracked him down, and he lives somewhere in Central California. All of the DA's info came from Andrew Campbell, and Andrew changed his story 3 times on the record. Each time the motive attributed to Mark was different. I have 2 clear motives that were stated in the trial or during the length of the trial. And I do want to interject that motive 1 is based on the science fiction book Imperial Marin, and I will put the book cover here and be quoting from the back of the book. Mark was writing, which took place in the future where, as the story goes, Marin County has become a place, quote, environmentally sound and an absolutely democratic and free society, unquote. It concerns a planet-wide society led by hero kings who were focused on creating a better future. This novel, actually a series of 7 books, was misrepresented in the courtroom and the press as a takeover of Marin County. And then please see a bit below here where I'm going to be talking, or further on in the video where I'm going to be actually quoting from the back of the book as to what it's about. And the second motive attributed to Mark is a motive in which they claim Mark needed the money. The DA claimed, based on the testimony from Andrew Campbell, that Mark masterminded the murder for the sum of $2,000. This was apparently substantiated based on a paper that Mark's attorney Shapiro, and we'll talk more about him later, got Mark to sign after he was jailed and when he actually had no visible means of support. But it was simply untrue prior to the death of Baldwin. In fact, Mark states that Mark's wife at the time, Karen, during the year before the murder, had spent over $500,000 on furniture alone. Mark states he was making far more money than was possible through his job as a contractor. Strangely, his ex-wife, Karen, who reportedly has a problem with alcohol at this time, does not seem to recall or has never been questioned on how often Mark was absent from home during their marriage. In reality, Mark's contracting business was a cover for money earned fighting in the Secret Space Command. Andrew Campbell is a highly suspicious character. This may be an assumed name. Joanne Richards hired a PI who tracked Andrew down to Central California. He has apparently witnessed the murder, participated in the murder, and then gave evidence and went free. There are two men who are said to have committed the murder, and they are, again, Crossan Hoover and Andrew Campbell. They were both 18 at the time, and only Hoover was charged. Please see all the researched and investigative background, which I do link on my transcript here. And the excerpt here are two key points. Richard Baldwin, the victim, was a known pedophile. Key points. This is an excerpt from the research. Key points. Richard Baldwin, the victim, was a known pedophile according to court records. Hoover committed the murder while on drugs, according to the court transcript. Hoover has a prior history of having been raped when young, which was considered inadmissible in court and hidden from the psychiatric evaluations, but apparently was available in the information surrounding the court case. Both boys were in their teens, and according to the court records, Andrew helped dispose of the body. We have very little information on Andrew so far, and he did not serve time. Mark's role, again, is unclear, and basically he is innocent. This is an added note. I believe Richard Baldwin was selected as a victim by the team within the military and at the highest levels of power in Britain and the U.S., responsible for framing Mark Richards. I have come to the conclusion that the murder was orchestrated with Hoover selected as the patsy due to his early history having been a victim of pedophilia and an unbalanced character. I also believe there is an underlying pedophile ring that is behind the scenes in the current campaign targeting Mark Richards. It is also significant that the individuals involved in targeting Mark Richards, Joanne Richards, and myself at this time come from Britain. And I also understand that there is some motivation within what I believe is MJ-12, also known as Committee of the Majority, also known as Scion, and multiple other names, but is basically more or less the same group that was tasked by Truman back in the years of the Truman administration to handle the ET problem. And this group is, from what we understand from the time of our interviews with Dan Burish, split down the middle in terms of the ones that want disclosure and the ones that do not want disclosure. And there is a very large Luciferian satanic contingent within that group. And this would certainly be the ones that were involved and are involved with targeting Mark Richards at this time, and would be backed by the Luciferian Alliance. So that this relates to the Luciferian Alliance, Satanism, and the Dark Magicians. All indications are that this targeting of Mark Richards is happening now after nearly 35 years since the verdict. And this is because of my interviews with Captain Mark Richards, revealing the true nature of the alien presence and the secret space program, as well as Space Command. And I believe that this targeting is aimed at further discrediting Mark and me and my work, as well as the work of Joanne Richards, Mark's wife. The motive behind this targeting and the people involved are working to hide the true facts about the alien presence on Earth and the secret space program. Key research links on Project Camelot are there on this transcript for you to click on, and they have been on my website for quite some time now. The research is conducted by Paul Collin, a former CIA, NSA NOC, or intelligence agency NOC, depending on how you look at it, which is an unacknowledged agent. And he was given a burn notice some years ago, and he was given a burn notice after concluding a job for one of these agencies, and basically his passport was taken away. He has had to live in his car as a more or less homeless person for several years now, and he is unable to get his rightfully owed pension as a result. So I have here an image of the back cover of the book by Mark Richards, and again, this is stated to be a science fiction fantasy novel entitled Imperial Marin. And here is the cover of the book, Imperial Marin, and it is 395 pages. It's quite substantial because the actual writing is quite small as well. It's a fairly large book. So this is book one of his science fiction fantasy, and I'm going to read how it is described on the back of the book. Years after the Triskelion Revolution pushed corruption out of the lands protected by the beautiful Mount Tamalpais, a young and vital generation of hero leaders faces threats that founders never dreamed about. Their lives based on passion for the planet and its people, these devoted individuals prove to have courage to take on the inevitable attacks from every source. But will they survive such overwhelming evil? Imperial Marin Book 1 brings to life a world where people have chosen to live in an environmentally sound, absolutely democratic, free society. This is no utopia, but a wild world where science has introduced uncleansed cultism without sanctuary. But through it all, the people know that it is their young hero kings that will guide the new nation to its destiny to be not only the future of Earth, but also humanity's political route to the stars. This story is written for adult readers who are seeking an epic new myth saga of political science fiction fantasy for the 21st century. Mark Richards. During this interview, I asked about Mark's lawyer, why he trusted him to represent him and the case. And then we also cover our customary topics later on to do with the secret space program. In order to be fully informed, you must see the investigation done by Camelot blogger Paul Collin, and I have already sort of detailed that and again put the links because this is such crucial information to get your facts right. So this interview is conducted March 10th, 2019 at the California State Prison Solano with Captain Mark Richards. Around the time of the murder, Mark had more than one construction company. He supervised crews that reported to him, and he had hundreds of people in the Secret Space Program or Secret Space Command who reported to him. Regarding Hoover and Campbell, Mark states he really didn't pay much attention to them. They were just ditch diggers as far as he was concerned. Side note, apparently there is also another young man named Willie Robles who was not charged but may have had something to do with the murder. Mark says that Robles was dating Hoover's sister at the time. Robles was dating Hoover's sister at the time and was said to go around saying he would bash someone's head in with a baseball bat if he got angry. And this does mirror what happened in the murder, apparently. Robles disappeared shortly after the murder and was not available for the trial because he joined the Navy. However, he had not actually reported to the Navy prior to the murder, and his defense at the time, according to what Mark heard, was that he had already joined and reported to the Navy, which was incorrect. In reality, he was still hanging around at the time of the murder. Mark suspects that it was actually Willie who committed the murder while the others looked on. And right before Baldwin was murdered, Mark learned that Baldwin was a pedophile. Baldwin owed Mark around $4,800 at the time and was slowly paying Mark back in both trade and cash. Mark makes the point here that killing Baldwin would cease the flow of money and be counterproductive in this case. And so the way that Mark learned that Baldwin was a pedophile is that Mark's company was hired to remodel Baldwin's house. Mark's crew called him one day at the beginning of the job to say they found a huge amount of child porn in the house, saying, "You won't believe what we found." And again, see those research links for more on Hoover's history of being molested by a pedophile when young, which factors into a possible motive for committing the murder. Right after the murder, when Mark was taken into custody, a lawyer friend of his family, whose name is Carl Shapiro, contacted him. Apparently, Carl Shapiro was a famous lawyer who worked on the Jack Ruby defense along with a famous lawyer called Melvin Belli. And Shapiro was not available to be interviewed by me or anyone else because he has passed on a few years ago. Shapiro was famous and associated with the mob. There's a link to Mark's defense team and the Kennedy assassination. And this other link is called Tinker, who was a private investigator. Apparently, Tinker was a member of Mark's defense team and also the Jack Ruby defense team, working with Shapiro in the past. And ultimately, Mark states neither Tinker nor Shapiro would do what Mark had asked them to do with respect to his case. Mark's alibi during the exact time of the murder was that he was eating lunch with his parents at his parents' house. His lawyer, Shapiro, told him that would never be believed by the jury. However, it is notable that they could never place Mark at the scene of the crime. Mark states that he had just returned from fighting a war in the Falklands, in which he was in a battle for the control of planet Earth. This was a turning point in the history of Earth, and if we had lost the battle, we would have lost control of Earth. It was a battle with the alien races, the Draco, reptilians, and Greys, the Raptors. And for more about the Raptors, please do see my other 9 interviews with Captain Mark Richards. But the Raptors are featured in Steven Spielberg, Jurassic World, and other films very specifically. And Mark claims that the Raptors had his back and were at his beck and call. And he was very arrogant back then. He was 29, and he was boasting while in the Falklands about how the Raptors saw him as a hero. He stated it was possibly because of this that they framed him for murder, although he doesn't know that for certain. And there's a special note here that, however, the Navy did use technology from aliens to see future timelines. We've discussed this in prior interviews. And it is very possible that Mark, they looked into the future and saw that Mark was going to be a problem and a whistleblower. If anyone reads the first volume of his 7-volume science fiction fantasy, Imperial Marin, one can easily see that he was a firm believer in democracy and freedom for all, and that he has a strong code of honor. It is not a leap to realize that James Jesus Angleton and the plot to kill Kennedy would have made clear both to Mark and his father that their philosophy of life was in direct opposition to the totalitarian, fascist approach of those who believed in rule by secrecy. Mark said that the war in the Falklands was won, but that it was the last great military campaign for Britain. The reason Mark and his father hired Shapiro is because he was a friend of the family and because he defended Jack Ruby. Shapiro apparently did volunteer to defend Mark, and all through the trial, Shapiro tried to convince Mark and his father that Mark would get off the charges very easily. Mark realized later that he was misled by this false sense of security that Shapiro conveyed. Shapiro had Mark sign a paper saying he was indigent while Mark was in jail, because that was more or less true at the time once he was locked up, and since he had no visible means of income at that point. However, prior to the murder, Mark had a very large income. This paper apparently added to the grounds for the claim that Mark's motive for the murder was said to be he needed money, when in fact, at the time of the murder, Mark had plenty of money. Also around the time of the murder, Ellis Lloyd Richards, Mark's father, was seen as a hero by the British and American Air Force and had just returned from fighting a war with aliens in Kamchatka, Russia. And in 1983, a 747 was shot down in Kamchatka, and I have a link in my transcript where you can go to see more about that story. Mark's father went into Letterman Hospital while Mark was in jail. Mark's father went into Letterman Hospital while Mark was in jail waiting for his trial. Mark was left to languish in jail for a year because Shapiro kept insisting that any day the charges would be dropped and Mark would be released. Carl Shapiro was fully read in on what Mark and his father were involved in, which is the Secret Space Command Secret Space Program. According to Mark, Shapiro actually did not want anything to come out in the trial to reveal Mark's true background. It is not hard to see that Shapiro's involvement with the history of the Kennedy assassination and the mob places Carl Shapiro in a uniquely advantageous position with respect to framing Mark Richards years later for the supposed murder of Baldwin. Finally, Mark was out on bail for about 8 months until the trial actually took place. James Jesus Angleton was a very powerful head of the counterintelligence division of the CIA, and he was head of the counterintelligence division between 1954 and 1975. Mark believes Angleton was one of the top human-alien liaisons between humans and the reptilians who were bent on taking control of the United States government. According to Mark, Angleton hated Mark and his father. This was, Mark stated, largely because both Mark and his father believed the American people had a right to know the truth about the alien presence and the secret space program, and this went diametrically against where Angleton stood as the acknowledged head of all secrets within the agency. In fact, Angleton was famous for his fervent belief in secrecy, so much so that members of the agency were often kept in the dark as to their own work. And Angleton was a known pack rat, had a huge system of files that he closely guarded. After his death, the whereabouts of those files, which contained key information on the crucial time in American history between 1954 and 1975, became in question. Project Camelot has reason to believe that copies of those files may exist, though most were confiscated shortly after Angleton's death. Now I have a quote here from the Tom Mangold book called Cold Warrior, James Jesus Angleton, the CIA's master spy hunter. And this quote is from page 54. Quote, ironically, although Angleton helped to develop the CIA's central registry, where names, reports, and cases were indexed, his staff had one of the worst records of any CIA component for contributing data into the main system after 1955. This was because of Angleton's obsession with secrecy and his inability to trust the security of the CIA's main filing system. Angleton believed there was nothing to prevent someone from stealing from the CIA's storehouse of secrets. Keeping the best files to himself also helped consolidate his bureaucratic power. And Angleton has been known to be instrumental in Project Paperclip, bringing Nazi scientists over after World War II, and Mark says Angleton was at the very top of the power hierarchy that was responsible for killing John F. Kennedy. It is inconceivable, this is a quote from Angleton actually, it is inconceivable that a secret intelligence arm of the government has to comply with all the overt orders of the government. James Jesus Angleton giving testimony to the Church Committee inquiry into CIA activities in 1975, and I have a link on my transcript if you want to pursue that information. Angleton had strong ties with the mob and, of course, the Dulles brothers, and you can get more about that in the recent book that was written by Talbot, I believe is the name, and it's called The Devil's Chessboard. It came out actually a year or two ago, and I have read it. A side note, Project Camelot was directly threatened. We were forced to abruptly close down. We were told people would die, including us, if we pursued an important line of research involving a leaked document from Angleton's files. We were forced to abruptly close down our investigation and fly back home. At the time, we had been scheduled to do an interview with a key contact when we received a phone call in our hotel room telling us to stop. We decided not to pursue our investigation after being threatened that if we did so, sources related to our investigation would be killed. As a consequence, the Angleton connection to the Mark Richards case reveals a very high and deep reason for him having been framed and imprisoned now for nearly 40 years. We are very aware of how high the Angleton connection goes with regard to the alien situation. And that is me speaking on my own behalf for Project Camelot. With regard to the trial, according to Mark, the DA relied exclusively on information provided by Andrew Campbell, see above, and there appears that Andrew Campbell was highly likely to have been a CIA undercover agent on the scene orchestrating events while Hoover was the patsy. The DA brought in new evidence at the time of the trial in his closing statement, which did not give the defense any time to reply to it. This is unorthodox, if not illegal. The piece of evidence had to do with a chimney sweep who had a receipt for lunch indicating Mark had bought his crew lunch prior to the time of the murder. Mark claims he simply paid for the lunch but did not stay and eat with his crew. He continued on to his parents' home to have lunch with them. Mark believes that although the chimney sweep's evidence did not place Mark at the scene of the crime, it may have swayed the jury. And I have investigated a bit about this idea of bringing in new evidence in a closing argument. I believe it is unorthodox. I don't know if it is illegal, but if there is a legal mind out there, anyone who is listening to this and you know something about that, please do write to me at carrie@projectcamelot.tv because that may be grounds for the entire case to be dismissed. Karen, Mark's wife at the time, divorced him during the trial. Mark believes she was pressured by the mob to do so. She apparently had family, her father who had ties to the mob. At one point, the judge fell asleep during the trial. Lastly, Mark stated that it is also possible Dick Baldwin is alive and well in a witness protection program. Special note, when Mark was arrested, the DIA, Defense Intelligence Agency, put together a report that refuted every charge against Mark. Mark believes that report still exists. At the time, there were several paper copies of the report made and distributed, which was in 1982, and also it was sent to the DA's office. The report was supposedly has disappeared, but there are still copies around, and if found, it would instantly free Mark. Regarding KM, and that's a designation for a suspected covert asset who is involved with a group from England that are attempting to target and discredit or further discredit Captain Mark Richards, as well as myself and Joanne Richards. See the background of KM as detailed in the investigation by Paul Collin linked above. One of the key things about that individual is that he has a sex shop in Amsterdam. And it's very possible that that's linked to the mob and to the gay mafia, etc. And that's my conjecture, not Mark's. And one of the people KM has contacted is someone who works for Mark. This person refused the interview and is loyal to Mark. Mark states the only way KM could have gotten the man's name is from the side of the government involved with framing him. This contributes to proof that KM has been tasked by them to further discredit Mark Richards and in the process Joanne Richards and me as the only journalist interviewing Richards. It also does sort of strike one as very convenient and rather desperate that the person KM would decide to target me after I have done actually countless interviews with 1,000 or more people, both in audio, on radio shows, as well as on my own YouTube channel, which has well over 700 video interviews at this time. So it does appear that he is using discrediting me as a way of getting notoriety for his work. It appears that KM is working for the Luciferian Rebellion, also known as the Reptilian Grey Draco Alliance. Hoover was granted parole after years of denial right after KM interviewed him. However, this was recently overturned. Mark has also said that the attacks on him, Joanne, and his family really started in 2017 when Mark started to appeal for a commuted sentence. However, recently all commuted sentences have been stopped, and we're not sure what that means for Mark's appeal. To understand Mark Richards' story is to understand that history as we have been told it is a lie. The development of the secret space program and the rule by secrecy hides the deals with and presence of alien races on planet Earth and changes everything. Many, if not all, wars have also been fought with various alien races, not only in the last 200 years, but long before that. And if you go through my interviews, my other 9 interviews with Mark, you will see that many of the wars he talks about back in history did concern various alien races. All of this is above top secret information. And you can see the best history of humanity and the wars fought both on and off the planet in another interviewee, Ashiana Dean, my interviews with her, and her Voyager books 1 and 2. Highly recommended. Other subjects. Mark agrees with the following concepts. 1, that there are many different timelines. 2, that Earth is a hologram, and that this whole galaxy multiverse is in essence probably a series of holograms. Humans have simultaneous incarnations and reincarnate. Time and space are simultaneous. Mark thinks that our brain can assist other versions of ourselves on other timelines. And yes, there are armies of androids in underground bases, both under the US and in China underground, and he has seen the Chinese androids. He still insists that cloning is a faulty, temporary science, and that most drones either give themselves away through off behavior or fall apart within a limited time, 3 or 4 months. Okay, so now I'll go through the various topics. How Mark got from the ground to the Orion ships. He went through portals. There are several different kinds. We have covered this in prior interviews, but he specifically covered this again here at my request, and that is through the use of jump points for shuttlecraft called Lagrange points, or L5, and there are 5 key points on this planet called Lagrange points, and this topic is covered to some degree in a previous interview. As I say, Google has a quote about this, the Lagrange points, which is, quote, structure of Lagrange points. There are 5 Lagrange points around major bodies such as a planet or a star. 3 of them lie along a line connecting the 2 large bodies. In the Earth-Sun system, the first point, L1, lies between Earth and the Sun at about 1 million miles from Earth, unquote. Mark says those points allow one to jump off the planet easily and may be used for shuttlecraft going back and forth to the larger Orion craft, which are parked above the planet. Mark says those points allow one to jump off planet easily and to be used by shuttlecraft going back and forth to larger Orion craft parked above the planet. However, now amateur astronomers focus on those points. They, the secret space program, don't use them very often. 2 kinds of portals, and I guess there are more, but these are the ones he's telling us about. One is called a dimensional portal, and that's where you travel with your body intact. The quantum gate, which is where you disassemble and reassemble your body on the other side. This one is dangerous and you can die in the process. Mark never uses the quantum gate. And so then I'm going to go into a key point in this entire interview. A key point in this entire interview is the AI takeover of Earth. There are 6 AIs from other planets and beings attacking planet Earth at this time, embedded in our AI and networks, and we are fighting them. This is a more direct, unequivocal statement about the state of AI on planet Earth than Mark has previously been willing to tell me. At this time, due to attacks on Mark, Joanne, me, and his family, he is now pushing the envelope even further on disclosure. This is my assessment in that case. Okay, human army. There are around 200,000 humans that were taken off planet by the Raptors, and they are ready to return and fight for humanity, but so far are unable to do so because humans are so unaware they would think it was part of Satan's army, when in fact they are dedicated to the survival of humanity. And this is one of the reasons why Raptors want disclosure. The takeover of planet Earth has actually already happened. We are battling the 6 AIs ongoing. We are also battling the Draco reptilians and certain species of Greys directly. The Greys report to the Reps report to the Draco. They are using AI as well. And the trogs are also an insectoid species that are also working against us. Note, we have some friendly AIs as well as other beings. For example, if you see my interview 9, he talks about the gaseous beings near Saturn that have been protecting us and a portal there from basic takeover, including the raptors, who are more equipped to battle the AIs than us. And for more on that, also see interview 9, where he goes into more detail about how the raptors are able to handle the AI and to actually sense them and their presence. And yes, this does include an AI takeover of our financial system. That takeover has basically already happened. This is, again, according to Mark. Disclosure has slowed. Right now, the raptors and some other beings who are fighting for us are pissed off at what is currently going on with the attacks on truth tellers. And he has heard that 6 UFO researchers have been murdered since Christmas. He doesn't have those names, but will supply them to me. The raptors and some other beings are very angry that disclosure seems to have been stalled recently. And I don't know if Jim Marrs is included among that group of individuals who have been murdered. It is possible. Not knowing who their friends are within the Secret Space Command, basically those working within it are no longer sure who their friends are, in part because AI has gotten in so deep they can no longer trust their own stuff or each other. Regarding the Iran war, yes, it is happening. They took troops out of Syria but left the Russians in charge on the ground there. We are working with the Russians in this war, which is actually what I have been saying. And the war with Iran does lead to the war with China, and the Russians will side with the U.S. And there's more about this in the Henoch prophecies, the Billy Meier Henoch prophecies, and as well as information that came to us in the early days through a whistleblower called Henry Deacon, also known as Arthur Neumann. Right now, they are trying to decide if they're going to start the official war very soon. There are races like raptors that are working very hard to stop the war. I asked if Syrians are similar in bloodline to the Iranian Aryan bloodline, and Mark said yes, and that humans with Aryan and also the blonde and blue-eyed human females are the most targeted and compatible as far as DNA with the reptilians. And this is partially the problem. Sickle cell anemia. Reptilians are not compatible with this gene, and it would rule out any person with that code for genetic breeding, food, or even sexual purposes. They cannot feed off the black race, and I guess specifically off the parts of the black race that have sickle cell anemia. Stargates in the Zagreb Mountains. There are Syrian refugees being taken off the planet and used for food and breeding. The reason for the war in Iran is to take over the Stargates in the Zagreb Mountains. Those Stargates are between Iran, Afghanistan, and Iran and Iraq. And this war has been ongoing. He has also talked about it in my previous interviews with him, and said that these are actually shifting gates. So this makes the defense of them even more difficult. They are stargates through which the Reptoids, Draco, and Greys are bringing in huge craft to take over Earth and transport thousands of human slaves off-world. So those gates are heavily contested. Regarding the Reptoids and the Draco, China is run by the Reptoids. Russia is out for themselves, but if you are useful to their agenda, and the U.S. is, then they will work with you, and that includes the UK. North Korea is run by the Reptoids. The Dracos are in control over those countries, because they are in control of the reptoids. Has there been a change in Trump? There does seem to have been a change in Trump over the last 6 months. Mark declined to say more about this, but he doesn't think the indictments are actually being acted on at this time. I asked him about the tunnel boring machines that have carved tunnels in plain sight in Tenerife, which is one of the sites of Atlantis and in one of the Canary Islands, where I went over the Christmas holiday. I asked him about these tunnels, and basically he said yes, they were created by the same tunnel boring machines used in underground bases. He said there are tunnels like that also in Canada. They do this in plain sight because they figure humans are too dumbed down to get it. He also mentioned the African Rift Valley that has a huge reptilian base, and he said that's because they can hide out in Africa. Regarding Sardinia and the spider beings and reptoids, I asked him about Sardinia because recently I was asked if I would lead a tour to Sardinia because there are many ancient sites there and lots of evidence of reptilian involvement. However, I told Mark that I have declined to go to Sardinia because when I looked at it on a psychic, intuitive level, I saw that there were tons of spider beings and reptilians there, and Mark said I was absolutely right. He said he wouldn't even go there, and it is true, not only in the past but also now. And my apologies to the people that live in Sardinia. I think it's probably a very beautiful island. I've seen pictures of it, and I do apologize for this information, but what can you do? Just for a comparison, from what I understand, Miles Johnston has a source that has told him that there are spider beings hiding out in the area in North England called the Lake District, and in the tunnels there. So that is also very disconcerting information. Turkey is a last stronghold for reptilians in the past, before they left Earth at one point, and there is so much reptilian symbolism in Turkey. This is because it was a last holdout before they left planet Earth, and I'm not sure the exact date of that. However, they are back in force now. I will say we have made a documentary called Göbekli Tepe. It's available on my YouTube channel. I highly recommend it. We were fortunate to visit Turkey and Göbekli Tepe about a year or two ago, and our documentary is excellent, I will say, and we have images there that no one sees around the internet. And I also will say that I interviewed a very interesting woman, Farah Yuduzu, I believe is how you say her last name, and she is an investigator and a ufologist in Turkey, excellent ufologist, and again interviewed her, and her interview is available on my YouTube channel. We are working on getting a tour group together to go back and do some more investigations in Turkey. Ongoing operations. Mark conveyed to me that he and his team still do go on operations. This was not said, but implied. He said he can't say more, but, quote, he is not always in his cell. The raptors are protecting me. Mark says they are protecting me and sometimes fly over my house when they sense I am under attack. He said that they also communicate in the early stages with humans by singing in soft and engaging tones. I mentioned that I was evacuated during the fires, and Mark said that elementals tend to protect wealthy homes and areas because that is where they prefer to hang out. And the fires are collateral damage in the war over the stargates and portals. He said there are lots of portals in the area where I live, which is north of LA, and that the Chumash Indians were well aware of this. They used to guard the portals, and the Chumash range all along the coast, all the way up to Santa Barbara. They are unable, the Secret Space Program, Space Command is unable to hide the violence in the war with the alien races, so they create collateral damage in the form of fires and other so-called natural disasters like earthquakes. The Trump administration, they are the only ones fighting for us in the U.S. at this time. But there is something going on right now with that administration. Clones are not reliable. Again, regarding clones, he said that clones get taken over too easily, and so they are not really a viable way to push things forward. I asked him if Kevin Spacey was set up, and Mark totally agrees that Kevin Spacey is being set up because of what he knows. John Lear. As many people know, I interviewed John Lear on stage recently at Laughlin, and have interviewed John several times on my YouTube channel and think very highly of him. However, apparently we have a disagreement with regard to Mark Richards and who he is. John did agree originally with Mark about the spider beings in Vietnam, and you need to see either my clips of John stating that he agrees, or the actual interview, which contains John being told about the spider beings in Vietnam. His spontaneous reaction was to agree with Mark Richards unequivocally, in part because Mark's information seemed to agree with another person that John thinks highly of, called Lou Baldwin, who's written several books. Let's see, on the group behind John Lear, I believe that John Lear is run by MJ12. It makes logical sense. He was involved with, members of MJ12 were involved with John's family as he was growing up. It just goes with the territory and John's history. And so I believe John is now under orders from MJ12 to basically disinfo or discredit Mark Richards. So he's doing so very strenuously. And I understand that recently he did an interview with Miles Johnston, in which he's again emphatically saying that he thinks Mark is, one of the things he said on a news group was he thought Mark was the quote-unquote biggest liar in the world. I think that John's over-the-top statements and the fact that he won't research Mark, he will not look into the court transcripts, he won't look into the case at all, and he also won't watch my interviews. This is the 10th interview. So if he ever wants to wake up and watch that information, that would be great. But I do understand that he is under orders, and this is the kind of thing where basically John has to protect his family. In order to do that, he has to do what he's told in order to sort of safeguard the so-called secrecy of Space Command and the Secret Space Program when he is charged with doing so. And I did suggest that Mark write to John with info that only a pilot of a large craft would know. But again, it's probably a moot point at this juncture, simply because John seems to have been under orders not to see Mark as a true witness, when in fact he is. And just for the record here again, for those who are interested, Simon Parkes has been contacted by his own sources, and Simon Parkes is a well-regarded source himself, and he has dealt with the mantid beings directly, as well as reptilians, and he has been told unequivocally that Mark is absolutely who he claims to be, and he has actually made a video that substantiates and backs this information that I'm giving you, saying that Mark is innocent of the crime for which he has been jailed. So let's see. John Lear was told that by some of his sources, which includes Cherry, and another source who has been in touch with me over the history of Camelot, who I know, who is, I doubt saying that that Mark is not correct, but a couple other sources John has that tell him that Dulcie was never invaded by us, but that is untrue. Please see the CIA whistleblower who, on his deathbed, did a confession at the Stephen Bassett Disclosure Conference, and I have that linked on my website. And that man was interviewed by Rich Dolan and Linda Moulton Howe, and his testimony is quite compelling since he was on his deathbed. I believe he has since died. Keep in mind that all of this is a challenge of discernment. I encourage those reading and watching this video to watch all of my Mark Richards interviews, listen carefully, see what resonates. Discernment is about being able to tell truth from falsity, and with all information, you need to do your own research. Regarding micronovas, I asked Mark about micronovas from the sun and other stars several light years away. For information on this, see Paul Collins' investigation into the micronovas, also called multi-messenger gamma ray bursts, and the link is provided for you in the transcript. Mark acknowledges that these are a threat, but says that he has been told by our alien friends, including the Raptors, that they would warn us in advance. They are able to redirect the burst. Project Camelot was also told years ago by Valery Uvarov, who is the Ron Pandolfi counterpart in the Russian KGB. So he was head of a Russian Weird Desk for several years, Uvarov was, and Pandolfi was head of the CIA Weird Desk and is still very active out there. That there are installations on Earth that were built by alien races to handle incoming asteroids. It occurs to me micronovas would fall into this category as well. Regarding the new human, in many ways, Mark Richards is like a new human. He grew up in the secret space program. He knows we are at war with various ET races for Earth and human sovereignty. He knows that there are both good and bad, or positive and negative, service to self versus service to other, aliens everywhere as there are humans, and that there are more good than bad out in the multiverse. But the bad ones can ruin your day, your year, your month, or your eon, as has been documented in the Oceana Dean Voyager books quite extensively. It is also refreshing to talk to him because it's not about whether ET is real or AI is real. This is a given. Instead, we talk about what is in essence the exopolitical playing field and the pressures both on and off planet, and what really matters in the human trajectory or journey into the future. We have alliances of mutual benefit to both parties with various ET and inner Earth races. Regarding blonde, blue-eyed females. The blonde, blue-eyed females, and my eyes are green, just FYI, are perfectly compatible DNA mix for the reptilian genetic engineering. In fact, they are the main sacrificial victim of the Illuminati, and this information comes from various sources, including Shane the Ruiner and others. And for the interviews with Shane the Ruiner, please go to my YouTube channel and put in his name. Judging from this, what it indicates is that blue-eyed blondes and Aryan lines have the most reptilian DNA of all the races, hence the compatibility. There was a raptor wedding in late February, around the 28th, and Mark says this was a major wedding uniting two major raptor family lines, and Mark calls it a great love story. Regarding Jan Michael Vincent, the actor, he was a close friend of Mark's and died of alcoholism because he had seen too much, knew too much, and couldn't handle it. Mark had the utmost respect for him and misses him. Regarding Ernest Borgnine, another famous actor who actually started off in the Navy, and both he and Chad Everett saw some things off the coast of Malibu that changed their life. The secret space program was afraid that Borgnine was going to talk, so they offered him a career in Hollywood, and he took it. He was also a friend of Mark's. There's a new national park off of Vandenberg Air Force Base. This national park is called Jack and Laura Dangermond Preserve and has been established to hide a huge ET underwater and underground base that stretches down to Malibu. This is the same base discovered on Google and made popular by Jimmy Church. Jimmy vowed he was going to investigate it further, but Jimmy clearly was shut down. And I do want to say that from what I understand, Jimmy did not discover it, but he certainly made it popular. And I'm sorry that I forget the name of the person who did discover it on Google. Apparently a lot of money has gone into this national park, which is really a cover for a huge alien base. Regarding nuclear tests in Nevada and off the coast of LA, many so-called nuclear tests were not really tests, but used to close portals to keep unfriendly beings out. They used nukes to displace the grid and to close the whole grid down. The nuke off the coast of LA, which was 100 miles off the coast, was not a test, but a closing of a portal. This is a very interesting piece of information. Mark says the AI has forced our military to dismantle HAARP. They took down the US and Russia HAARP, and that leaves us defenseless, according to Mark. Our military were forced by the AI, and they obeyed the order. Project Camelot was told years ago that HAARP technology could construct a shield over sections of planet Earth, and that allowed us to detect incoming craft. This is what actually might be the truth, and what we were told. And Mark's comment that we are now defenseless is very significant with regard to HAARP. And obviously this would relate to the more positive aspects of HAARP. Regarding the Dracos, they are involved in wars in the Orion constellation, but are also very involved in Earth. They are trying to split the Raptors' focus. The Raptors are working with the Air Force from humans and Earth by causing wars elsewhere. Regarding other timelines and the AI, which apparently are getting mixed up. The generals, Mark says, are now realizing that AI could be making mistakes and confusing the timelines and acting inappropriately because they think they're on a different timeline. So the AI may be assessing the situation, thinking it's happening right now on our timeline, but it may be happening on another timeline. And the action the AI chooses may play out on our timeline, and we haven't even arrived at the place where the AIs are attempting to deal with. And we have no control over those AIs. We don't know if the AIs have the ability to distinguish between which timeline they are on. It's important to know that Mark's enemies were Kennedy's enemies. And the day Kennedy went to Dallas, he was on the way to address an aerospace group of scientists about what was really going on, and he was going to disclose the real war with aliens that we are fighting. Regarding the Pentagon, the plane that supposedly hit the Pentagon, even if it wasn't a plane, which Mark acknowledges, Mark says it's important to remember that they had a manifest for that plane with supposed passengers, and that those passengers contained some top agency people several generals, and others, and all of them have disappeared. No matter what really hit the Pentagon, those people are gone, off planet underground, or dead, or possibly given new identities with their minds wiped. We don't know which. Regarding AI and 5G, the Internet of Things, 5G lays the groundwork for AI to travel everywhere around the planet without restriction. And Mark says that this is key, and this is also something that I intuitively have said prior to this information coming to me from Mark. So that is the end of this interview. Again, the transcript is a written transcript available on my website, projectcamelot.tv. And I want to thank you for watching and for listening and for supporting the work of Project Camelot. Take care, and please use discernment and do your own investigation. Thank you, and good night.